Namaste, everyone.
Stay.
Welcome to our second episode of the Dharma Dialogues. I'm here with David, founder of Island Yoga. We're live in Koh Yao Noi on a beautiful day. And today we're going to be talking about consciousness, mind, and ego. These are three very different things, but somehow interconnected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the best way to start is to define these terms, right?
Yeah.
Consciousness, mind, and ego, what are they?
All right. Well, consciousness, mind, and ego. A lot of yoga, it revolves around the mastery of these. And we would say consciousness is pure consciousness is spirit. Pure consciousness is your soul nature before mind, before body. Because in yoga we say body, mind, spirit. It's a body, mind, spirit practice. But if we go into consciousness, then we're in pure spirit. It's another word for spirit. It's a modern word for spirit. And in yoga we're always trying to elevate our consciousness. We're trying to evolve in consciousness. Trying to become more conscious and less unconscious. so there's consciousness in its own way. And then we have mind, which mind has many aspects to mind, so we don't need to dwell too much on mind, but really it's consciousness coursing through the neural pathways of the brain that creates mind. There is no mind before consciousness, so we have consciousness. Consciousness comes into the physical body, it courses through the neural pathways and it creates mind, and it creates conscious mind. And then we have conscious mind and we have unconscious mind. And typically in modern Western human beings, they're usually about 5% conscious mind and 95% unconscious mind, which is okay in modern. It sounds dramatic, but it's not too bad, because most of the programs that we have that we need to run on automatically are our unconscious mind programs, And again, in yoga, we would say that we're trying to elevate our mind. We're trying to expand our mind. That's one of the journeys of yoga, to elevate the consciousness, expand the mind, and then ego, that's the bogeyman in all of this. Good and bad in ego. We can be an insufferable ego monster, but we can also have a beautiful presence in our ego if we're artistic, if we're creative. But again, in yoga, we would always be emphasizing that we're trying to transcend the ego. We're trying to go past the ego that holds us on the earth plane and keeps us in the me, I, external personality self. We're trying to go beyond that into a more ego-less state, a more conscious state, a more expanded mind state. So they're all connected, and it is all the journey of yoga. It's the journey of yoga into higher consciousness, expanded mind, transcending ego.
So when you say expanded consciousness and this idea that we're only 5% conscious and 95% unconscious, I think you're talking about like those patterns, the things that we're doing without thinking about, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what does expanded consciousness mean? What does that look like then?
Well, again, we have to relate it to the practice of yoga. If you're doing a yoga practice on a consistent basis every day, like we all should be doing right now, because it's most of, we don't have much else to do, just by the practice of yoga, just by the practice of elevating your physical beingness, by getting fitter, by increasing the vibration, by raising the energy levels in our physical body, our mind naturally, our consciousness naturally expands. It just expands. We become more aware, we become more knowing, we become more perceptive of who we are and where we're going and what our purpose in life is. And it's a natural process. And conversely, the more that we stress out, the more we go into fear and doubt and anger and hopelessness, our consciousness decreases. It comes into like a myopic kind of consciousness where we can hardly see where we're going and we're panicking. So and consciousness in that way is related to the mind. It's mind consciousness growing, it's expanding and it's contracting. And it's always expanding and contracting. But again, in the journey of yoga, we want to get to a place where we understand that we have a certain level of consciousness, and then we work from that and we elevate the consciousness. And again, I just touched on this very briefly. There's an amazing book written by David Hawkins, very eminent psychiatrist, and he's the only person in modern history, and also ancient history, who's actually charted a scale of consciousness. And this is an arbitrary scale of 0 to 1,000, 1,000 the highest you can get fully enlightened, the Jesus, the Buddha, the Krishna. And 0 is, you're not here, you're like zeroed out. And through muscle testing, through kinesiology, and it's every single time effective, he's understood, and he wrote the book in the late 80s, early 90s, so it's 30, 40 years ago now, but through the testing he understood that most people in the world today are around about 200 in a scale of 0 to 1,000. We're about 20% away. And if you work on your yoga and you go into a more creative way of being and a more detached from society way of being, you tend to go up the scale into 300s and 400s. Halfway, 500, is only about 0.4 of the population. And that's only half conscious. So that tells you, just, and maybe even more sobering, and also, for me, very enlightening. Most people in that time, late 80s, early 90s, they only moved about 5 points in a whole lifetime. So if you came into this lifetime at, say, 205 in a scale of consciousness, typically you're going to go to about 210. Not very much. But he said the caveat on this was most people live in the third world. And in the third world, their aspirations are not expanding consciousness. Their aspirations are putting food on the table, putting a roof over their head. And he did say that modern young people, and this was just when the internet was starting, he said there's 4 things that allow young people to go through hundreds of points in a lifetime. And those 4 things are travel, information, multiple relationships, and multiple careers in a lifetime. In the old days, grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they stayed in the same village, they did the same job, they were married to the same person, they didn't change much at all. They certainly didn't have the internet, But young people today, with the expansion of knowledge and wisdom and information through the internet, the good side of it, and unlimited travel until now, and choice of multiple careers, and you can change your career many times in the lifetime, and multiple relationships, they allow us to grow, they allow us to experience life and learn from those experiences, all the different flavours of life, and grow. And so in a very practical sense, that's a way. A very practical yoga is living, breathing yoga, having different relationships, different careers, travelling and understanding different, say, traditions, wisdom traditions and cultures through travel.
I'm curious, you talked about the physical practice of yoga as a means of expanding consciousness. What is that relationship?
I would say with the yoga, we always talk of 5 aspects of yoga: the asana, the pranayama, the breathing, the tai chi, the bhakti, and the meditation. Down at the ground floor, the asana, I think, is the most important today. It's not the most powerful yoga, but it's the yoga that everybody can relate to today. We can all do some stretching and breathing, and breathing is the key there. I think if we start to stretch and breathe, as soon as we start to stretch and breathe, we get off the couch, we get out of bed, we get out of the kitchen, and we just get the mat out and start to stretch and breathe, the energy starts to flow and our mind starts to open. We feel better, and that's the key to initiating the expansion of consciousness. Very simple, very baby steps into waking ourselves up physically first. And once the physical body is awake, because remember, in this 95% of unconscious mind, the unconscious mind is residing in the cells of the body, its habits, its conditioned behaviours. And when you juice the body, when you wake the body up with exercise and breathing and good nutrition as well, and healthy relationships, psychological as well as physical, but right now we're talking about the physical, yoga. We wake the body up, we juice the body, and we start to stir all those old unconditioned behaviours, that unconscious mind, and it starts to wake up and it expands. And the energy, like any energy, when you wake it up, it tends to rise, and in yoga it rises up the spine. It activates the cerebral spinal fluid, especially with powerful breathing exercises, kundalini breathing exercises. We awaken the spinal fluid, it comes up to the brain, it hits the pineal gland, and we start to awaken. And that's a natural process of yoga. So again, we should be doing that every day. We should be getting our mats out, doing our asana, and then working powerfully on our on our pranayama, and our breathing. And then finally, really, the ultimate consciousness expansion, but it's also the hardest yoga, is meditation. So at the end of practices, if we can, we do a very simple silent meditation where we still the chattering monkey mind, and again, you've got to understand that in modern cerebrally minded young people, they think 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day. That's a lot of thinking. And we can take up to 80% of our daily energy just in thinking.
Oh.
And it's this obsessive compulsive thinking. They say that up to 90% of those thoughts are the thoughts we thought yesterday and the day before. So there's a lot of repetitive thinking going on. And when we tend to energize the body in yoga, that chattering monkey mind, that highly cerebral mind, tends to slow down, and we get more energy for our health, more energy for our consciousness, more energy to see where we're going and what we're supposed to be doing with our lives.
Let's talk about the chattering monkey mind for a second. Why do we have that? Like, why is it in our nature to have a brain that brings all these thoughts into our mind if really our goal is to quiet that down and come into our inner essence or inner awareness?
That's the blessing and the curse, isn't it?
Right.
It's the blessing and the curse of modern man, the scientific man. Scientific man, the crowning achievement of the modern man is the frontal lobe. It's 40% of the brain, and it's where all the intellectual stuff goes on. And so a lot of us are stuck in that frontal lobe arena where we're constantly questioning things and analysing and logic and ration and reason,
Which is good, right?
But you have to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, in modern life, we have to do all of those things. But then it takes on an almost obsessive conveyor belt thing. We're just going around and around and around it and questioning it deeper and more. And we're not going to our consciousness to see what's really going on behind that questioning. We just get caught up in the question. We get caught up in our cerebralness. And that actually leads to the ego. Because once you're caught up in that cerebral, intellectual domain, you've actually lost the spiritual domain. Because the spiritual domain is beyond the intellectual domain. We actually call it the small mind and the large mind. And of course, if you're very intellectual, you think you're very smart, and that's your ego thinking that you're very smart, and it won't allow you to go beyond the ego. It thinks there's death beyond the ego. There's nothing else because you're smart, and there can't be a bigger brain. There can't be more intelligence than what you've got in your frontal lobe. And of course, the yogi understands innately that the higher intelligence is beyond the intellect. It's in pure intelligence. It's in consciousness. It's in the silence that resides behind that chattering monkey, behind that inquiring mind. So you actually need the inquiring mind, and you need the logic and the reason and the rationing, and you need the science, and you need to be smart in an intelligent way, in an intellectual way. But you also need to be smarter to know when to stop the questioning and go to the silence and go to the greater spirit and listen to your soul nature speak to you. So there we've got ego, we've got intellectual mind, and we've got pure spirit. And that's our journey. It's a constant working of those dynamics. It's a constant working of the ego and trying to understand that a smaller ego is healthy, and we need an ego to get out of bed, otherwise there'd be no purpose to life. But we don't need the ego to be the monster that's dominating our lives and we're the great I am, and there's nothing beyond that. Then we're restricted by the ego, and that is a lot of Western society, especially successful people. The more successful they become with prestige, symbols in their lives, the car, the house, the trophy wife, that becomes their identity. That's who I am. I'm the CEO. I've got a big bank account. I've got a yacht. I've got kids in private school, That becomes their identity. They're trapped in their ego. They've lost the yoga. They've lost the soul. So they become a body-mind person. Body, mind, and there's no evolution there. You just go into more acquisitions, more wealth, more luxuries, more trophies. More of me, look at who I am, look how magnificent I am. And the yogi's quietly shaking his head and walking the other way. He's like, that's not the answer. That's the modern, egotistical mind at work, the successful modern person. And so It's okay to have all of that. There's nothing wrong with any of that because that's part of the natural intelligence of the universe. A Porsche, Ferrari, $1 million in the bank is actually okay. A nice yacht in the bay is perfectly okay so long as you're not attached to it. If you're not attached to it, if you can let it go at any time and walk away and say, well, they're all very nice and they're beautiful luxuries and I have a lot of fun with them, but the most important part of myself is my soul, and I won't corrupt my soul in pursuit of these things, then you can have them. And that's one of the beautiful dynamics. People think that you have to give it all away, especially in the hippie days of the 60s and 70s. Oh, we have to relinquish everything. We have to give all the money away to charity so that we can find our soul nature. Some of those people had to do that. But we're more sophisticated than that. You can have all the goodies so long as you're not corrupted by them. So long as you're not identifying with that's who you are. You're just a custodian of those goodies. It's very cool to have a Ferrari. Very cool to have a yacht in the bay. Very cool to have a healthy bank balance. That's smart and it's a nice way to live. But it's you don't become corrupted by it. If you become corrupted by it, if it becomes who you are and there's nothing beyond that, and then you've lost the plot. So that's our journey. That's our essential journey in this modern time, is to find that balance between looking after ourselves on the earth plane in a comfortable and responsible way while pursuing the spiritual journey. And that's what modern yoga is all about in a nutshell. That's what it really is all about. Developing the ego but not letting the ego become a monster. Developing the intellect so that you have a fine, smart mind, but realizing that that's not the limit either. And developing the consciousness so that you're in touch with your soul nature, and that's the guiding principle. The guiding principle is your soul. So you're always, every day, you're going back into meditation, you're checking in. Who am I? Where am I going with all these goodies, with this beautiful, with all the things that I have or I don't have? Because again, as a yogi, you should be quite okay not having anything as well. Right. It's all okay. If you find yourself where you don't have those, that's just as good. And if you do have them, that's fine as well, so you're not attached. And then there's actually a limitless abundance to your life, because you can call anything in. And if you need to let go of it, you just let go of it. You're a yogi. You're on the path then. You're on the Dharma path.
And we'll be talking about a lot of these concepts next week when we talk about the 7 spiritual laws of success as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, for me personally, I look at my childhood and some of my past traumas, and I can acknowledge the fact that a lot of my strengths and a lot of the things I love most about myself come from those experiences, right? Like when we experience suffering or when we experience challenges or adversity in life, that's when we learn. So I'm curious, when we talk about letting go of ego and how we choose the aspects of ourselves or those things that are helping us survive versus the things that we need to let go of to find our inner awareness, how do you find that balance?
One part of it, I think, as you get more into yoga, you start to become what we call the observer. And you're the animated being doing your life, but there's one part of you that becomes a little bit superior, not in an egotistical way superior, but a little bit elevated, and that's the soul nature. And it has the ability to look down at the ego, mind, body, self doing its day. But it's a little bit detached, and that's how you stay in touch with who you really are, so that you can watch and manage this other being, this earthbound being, doing its thing. But also in a yogic sense, what we understand, if you think of yoga in terms of energy centers, in terms of the chakras, most people today, I think with this, with the corona drama that's still going on, most people are slightly stressed, a little bit fearful, wondering when the next paycheck's going to come in, when they can start traveling, if they're going to get infected. There's all this fear, and obviously dialed into the media as well, which is amplifying the fear. It doesn't do anything for you positively usually, because it makes you feel helpless. And so in yoga we would say that you're trapped in the 3 lower chakras. You're trapped in the lowest chakra of survival, the second chakra of procreation, and the third chakra of ambition. And it's okay to be in those for limited amounts of time, but all 3 of those are ego-based. There's no real soul nature, there's no high intelligence, there's no high vibration in those 3. They're there to serve you as survival on planet Earth, and they're not there for 24/7. You know, when you need to take drastic action, when you need to change things, when you need to just knuckle down and get things done fast in survival mode, that's what they're there for. People stay in that survival stress mode for years and years at a time, especially city people. They're in low-grade stress for years and years on end, and slowly the biology is changing, because when you're in that low-grade stress, you're producing adrenal hormones, which becomes toxic biology, and that toxic biology down-regulates the gene, which is your life force. So eventually you start to get out of balance, you get disease. Now, in the practice of yoga, and this is where we should all be going now, we understand that these 3 lower chakras have their purpose, but we don't need to stay there. We need to acknowledge it and say, yes, we need to have that energy, but we also need to raise the energy 1 chakra. You take it up just to the middle chakra, to the heart center, Anahata chakra, and suddenly everything changes. You start to become more compassionate, more understanding, more loving, more aware, more empathetic. Everything changes, and as soon as that happens, as soon as your heart starts to open, and your heart doesn't open down here, it's, you know, you can't be in full survival mode and have a big open heart as well. It's one or the other. You know, if you're in survival, everything else is closed down, all the energy's down here just trying to make it through the day. But this drama that we're going through now, it is what it is. We can't change it today or tomorrow. It's going to change eventually, and it's supposed to be, because it's part of the natural intelligence of the universe. So we have to accept it first before we can transcend it, which is a spiritual law. But we just raise our energy through breathing, through reading inspiring literature, through the practices of all the yogas, through music, through inspiring videos, you know. We just raise it 1 chakra to the heart. Our heart opens, the energy comes up, and we feel suddenly, wow, we can start empathizing, we can be compassionate to ourselves and our families and other people. We raise that energy again, we just draw the energy up just to the throat chakra, and we feel much more powerful, and we start to articulate words of wisdom. We draw that same energy, it's all the same energy, it's all chi, it's all energy, it's all life force, it's been down there. We draw it up a little bit further, we simply pull it up the spine, and we bring it to the 3rd eye, Ajna chakra, and we start to become intuitive. We develop a 6th sense. We start to know and see and understand where to go and what to do without going into meditation, without trying to have a full-on mystical experience. We're starting to understand. And then ultimately, and again we should be doing this every day, we draw that energy through the practice of yoga, just stretching and breathing, and then consciously drawing the energy up the spine. We bring it to the crown of the head, we open up Sahasrara chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus, and we've got connection, we've got Wi-Fi. We're connected to the unified field of all intelligence, all knowing, fully conscious, fully awake, you know? And we've left survival a long way behind. We feel amazing, and we're like, wow, life is good. You know, what should we do? And you start getting much more creative. Your mind opens, you have a clear, calm perspective on life. You understand who you are and what you're doing at this point in time. And you can make smart choices. You can make smart choices for living in the now, and smart choices for where you want to put your energy in the future. And you can't do that down here, when you're stuck down here. So it's actually beholden to us at this time, isn't it? When you think about it, we can't be dwelling in this low fear, anger, guilt, helplessness space. I mean, it's redundant, it's toxic, you know, it's going to take us further down. So just from daily practice of yoga, getting on the mat and just stretching and breathing, everything changes. You stir that energy up, you rise it up, heart, throat, 3rd eye, crown, boom, you're open. And you do it once, you do it the next day, you do it the day after, you get good at it, you know, you become a competent yogi.
Right.
You're starting to wake up, you're starting to become more conscious, and you realise that there's not so much ego around. You're like, there's not so much thinking about myself and maybe feeling a victim, you know, and why is the world doing this to me at this time, you know? You start to understand that you're part of the matrix, and it's all in balance, it's all in harmony, and that you're going to create a destiny according to the level of consciousness that you can bring to the show.
Well, if you're living in line with your Dharma and you have a strong intuition, if everything's in line, then the survival should come more naturally.
Well,
then, right?
Well, it's not survival anymore.
Right.
It's just evolution.
Right.
It's not survival. Survival is when, you know, when all the other options have gone, and we've only got one choice. You know, so we're actually in myopic mind. when we're down here. We can't really think very clearly, and we have to get things done quickly, and so we don't make smart choices, and it's not the best investment of our energy. As soon as we raise our energy and raise our vibration and open our mind, we can see much more clearly. And this is really important, our perspective changes. Down here you have a fearful perspective, and you're like, worst case scenario, and you're dwelling on the worst case scenario, and you just got to make sure all the bases are covered, you know? When you're up here, it's the same circumstances out there, it's the same environment, but your perspective changes completely, and you go, oh, it's all okay, don't worry about it, you know, we can find a way through this, we're smart enough to understand what to do and how to do it, because your mind is open, you know? So that's what we're talking, when we're talking about consciousness and ego and mind, we're talking about opening up our energy systems, raising the energy, increasing the vibration, so that we do get a bigger perspective. We say there's 3 ways to get sick generally in life. There's 3 ways. Number 1 way is genetic malfunction. It's about 5% of the population are born with genetic genes, and 95% of us are actually born healthy. Right? The second way is toxins. If we get toxins in the body, they can make us sick. That's about another 5%. We're eating and ingesting maybe pollution from cities or heavy metals or something like that. So we've got 10%. 90% is by thought. You get sick by thought. This is modern science. This is not some wooey mystical thing. This is statistics from modern science. 90% of people get sick because of the way they think. Because they're thinking down here. They're thinking in a non-intelligent way. As soon as you raise that energy up, you take a different perspective. It's the same scenario, but your mind is looking at it in a whole different way. It's looking in a much more creative and open and hopeful way. You know, your perspective changes, and so you make different choices, good choices, choices that are based on your soul nature intelligence. The biology changes to a beneficial, holistic biology. The gene is upregulated, you become healthy, you develop a very powerful immune system, everything gets better. And again, that's the practice of yoga, and that's what we need to be doing now. There's no choice in it. No choice.
I'm curious, we talked a little bit about this before the conversation, but you know, a lot of what I've read about yoga and about ego is like we need to completely release ourselves from ego, and you read about these yogis who are living in caves as ascetics, you know, and completely removed from society, but they say that's the goal, right? But I think for many of us in modern society, we want to remain kind of individual and have a strong sense of who we are. So what is the role of ego in that sense?
Good question. People, when they're beginning the yoga journey and you say to people they're going to be transformed, they're going to change, most people say, I want to change, but I don't want to lose myself.
Right.
You know, I want to become the same person, I just want different situation in my life, different, you know, experiences. And the truth is that you do change, but you don't lose anything. You transcend who you used to be. You grow up. It's a bit like saying the kids in the kindergarten and you give them some keys to play with when they're 2 years old and they're happy. And you think, you're 30 years old, you still want to be in the kindergarten, you don't want to change, you still want the keys, you're a little more, you want to play with your Ferrari now. So when you grow first into the ego when you're a young person, because you need that ego to know who you are as an adolescent, especially in the teenage years, and then in the 20s when you're making something of yourself, and then you start to push against the boundaries of it, and you realize, oh, there's more to life. You know, there's a mystical side to life, there's a transcendental side to life, and I need to go beyond the ego. But you don't lose who you are, you actually discover more of who you really are. Because the true self, the soul nature, the immortal, eternal, always has been, always will be side of you is an individual. It's a unique individual, and that's who you become. You become that soul nature that expresses yourself, walking the earth plane. That has a reasonable amount of ego still, but the ego is not running the show anymore. You're running the show from your wisdom, sage, yogi perspective, and you're allowing the ego to do its dance in front of you, but you're the master puppet. You're not being manipulated by the ego anymore, but you're just using your ego wherever you need to in a controlled and nice way. You know, so like I said, when you're coming into the world of yoga, it can seem intimidating that you don't want to lose your identity. This is what people think, they're going to lose their identity, and they don't want to. You're transcending the old you to become the new you, and the new you is always a more magnificent you. It's a smarter, kinder, more radiant, more fabulous you. Why wouldn't you want to change that?
Right.
But there's work to do. You know, you have to let go of the old self. And in letting go of the old self, you actually have to accept the old self. And that's probably the hardest part of the journey, is going within, because you have to go within at a certain time and see the dark side of yourself, you know, the negative side, the shadow side, the pain body side of yourself, and accept that. And a lot of people get stuck at that part in the journey. Their ego says, there's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
Don't tell me I've got negativity. I'm okay. I'm perfect already, you know? And they're in denial. You know, and you can't go further in yoga, you can't go further in the journey of consciousness until you surrender that part of the ego and say, yes, of course I have faults. Yes, of course I'm not perfect. Yes, of course I've got things I've got to work on, and I'm asking my soul nature to show me how to do it. So you're surrendering to greater intelligence to show you the way, and it does show you the way. And then once you've embraced that soul nature, you become consciousness, pure consciousness. Then you're looking down at the small you, the small I, you know, the ego self, the ego personality self, and you're going, well, you've still got a role to play, but there's a master operator up here, the real you, the deeper, eternal spirit soul you, that's running the show. And then you actually feel more confident, you feel more in control, you feel more mastery, because you've gained a mastery of the ego and intellectual mind. And that's a big, big step on the journey of yoga. So again, great question about, you know, how do I surrender the ego? It's that journey of going within. And the classic way of analysing and understanding what the ego is meditation. Once you still that chatter monkey mind, and you go into deep silence that resides behind the 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts, you see exactly who you are. But the beautiful part about it is in deep meditation, there's no emotion. There's no judgment. So you can be looking down at your ego self, and it's almost like a therapist looking at a patient, but
Right.
you are the therapist and the patient. And you're going, oh, interesting personality down there. Interesting set of circumstances and conditioned behaviours and habits and dharmas, and, you know, and all the rest of the matrix that makes up our ego personality. And so you have a compassionate insight into who you really are from a higher perspective, down
Right.
into the darker aspects of yourself. And it also shows you the parts that you need to work on. And because you are part of the infinite intelligence of the universe, it doesn't overwhelm you with too much to do at one time. So it brings up different aspects of yourself that you need to work on. And they come up and you go, okay, well, that's not a perfect part of me, I have to work on that part. And you work on it and you gain a mastery over it. And when that's done, another part will come up and you go, okay, now there's another part of me to work on. And eventually you've got a few, like a jumper, you've got a few balls going there, but you're simply working on your beingness.
Right.
And it becomes a beautiful journey, you know. And the more you work on it, the more you gain in consciousness, the more you gain in power and spirit and soul. You become an inspirational person. And this is a joyful journey. You can't wait to clean up your act, because there's just more power, there's more beautiful power, spirit power, you know, there's more wisdom, there's more chance to change yourself, there's more creativity, and there's more chance to inspire other people. So you become a yogi, you become an in-spirit person, you become inspirational. And then that's consciousness again, we're going back to consciousness. So it's the journey, ultimately, from ego to consciousness, through the portals of the mind. You know, the mind is the middle ground here, you know. And again, when we go to meditation, we still the monkey mind, we still the intellectual mind, and we go to superior mind or higher mind, you know, pure consciousness, pure soul. So we're always oscillating between them. When we're doing daily life, we have to be in ego mind, you know, but we're in conscious ego mind.
Right.
You know, once we become, maybe I'll finish on this part, once we become unconscious mind, then we're at the mercy of the ego again. We're not conscious. The ego takes over and it just runs the show. And it's never the best result. You know, it gets through the day okay, but you're unconscious. You just don't know who you are. And people, people can say to you, do you know how you behaved, yesterday or last night or whatever? And you're like, not good. Not so good. You were unconscious, So again, it's the journey into expanding that 5% to 10 to 20 to 50. You become a fully conscious person, and the ego, in direct proportion, deflates.
Right.
So you find the right balance. And it is this balance between being in the body, being in the mind in the world, the ego personality mind, which is important. You need a personality, you need an ego, but having the soul as the ascendant part of you, having the mastery of the soul to run the show. And so you're always checking in as well. You have to do the practices every day because you have to gain this mastery of meditation. That's the bottom line at the end of it all. You have to do the meditation so that you can check in every day. Who am I? Where am I going? What's my life all about? And it's changing every day. So
Right.
you can't check in once a year. You need to check in every day, and you see what's going on, and you go, okay, so I need to make these changes now, and I need to make that, because your soul nature in meditation is showing you what to do. Meditation is essentially an intelligence information gathering arena. So we check in at the end of every day, or the beginning of every day, or the beginning and the end of every day. We check in twice a day of these days, and we get fully aware of who we are, and where we can go, and how we get there. The meditation even shows you how to connect the dots. Not just what you've got to do, but how to get from A to B in doing that.
But, about what you just said, I remember when I was doing my yoga teacher training, they talked about, all of the asana practice is about preparing the body for meditation. And meditation really is the center of yoga in this way.
They call it royal yoga.
Right.
They call it royal yoga. It's the king of yogas, Raj yoga. Meditation. It's the hardest yoga, but it's the most important yoga. And I would very rarely recommend people to try meditation without the other yogas. It's much. The Indian yogis, interestingly, gave us asana, and they gave us pranayama, and they gave us bhakti, the singing, as preparations for meditation. You need to prepare your body-mind matrix to get into that silent space.
Right.
So the asanas awaken the energy in the body, and they open the body. Your body feels, you feel comfortable being in your body, and you feel alive being in your body. And then your mind is opening as well. And sometimes you've got a crazy mind, and you've got to still that crazy mind down. So as you go through maybe an hour of stretching and breathing, the body's awakening and the mind is stilling. And then you get to a point where you feel comfortable sitting down in silence for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And the physical body is able to do that because of the stretching and the breathing you've been able to do. And the mind is still down to the point that you're not distracted when you're going deeper in. And then you can check in. Another beautiful point to the meditation, as well as just purely checking in, when you go into states of meditation, very often old samskaras, old conditioned behaviours are released from the unconscious mind, and you can't get to them ordinarily. You can't get to them through psychology very easily, So just the technique, the method, doesn't matter what method you use of meditation, but being in meditation releases these old unconscious samskaras, conditioned behaviours, and it only releases the ones that don't serve you. The conditioned behaviours that you need for a good show, to run the show, learn how to drive the car. You don't want to get out of bed and have to learn to drive the car every day. You don't want to get out of bed and have to learn to speak English every day.
Right.
So there's learned behaviours and patterns of behaviour, habits that we have that serve us, and it leaves those alone. But there's also patterns of behaviours, usually when we're very young people, that we've picked up, obnoxious behaviour that we've had as a child, and we're still using it. And it shocks us sometimes, and it's just an old pattern of behaviour. It's what we call a samskara. And in meditation, those things float to the surface, and they become obvious to you, and they burst, and they release. The energy of those negative behaviours, this is 70% of our conditioned behaviours is negative, and 95% of it is down there, unconscious. So we've got 95% unconscious behaviour that we're running on, 70% negative, until you start doing yoga. Once you start doing yoga, these old conditioned behaviours are released, they're dissipated, they no longer have any power over you. It might become 50%, and then 40, and then 30. And so it becomes the other way. You become 70% good conditioned behavior, 80% good condition. You start to be in the right place at the right time with the right people, getting the right things done. You start to become much more synchronized because you're in the flow of yoga. And then people are going, I don't want to change.
Right.
This is the change, and the change is always for the better. But it takes work, it takes practice. You have to do it every day. There's no shortcuts.
It's interesting. I feel like a lot of people I talk to, when you ask people about their life or their life story, so much of it is trauma, right? Like a lot of people, that pain becomes a huge part of themselves, and I think that makes it even harder to release when that's how we associate our self with ourselves, right?
Becomes our identity.
Right.
Again, this is ego, and modern psychology tells us that people hold on to old traumas and old dramas because it's part of their identity. If they lose that, they don't know who they are, and they think that there's a void behind that, and they'll be helpless and they won't be anybody. And what they don't realise is there's a magnificence behind it once you let go of that old behaviour. And so we tend to focus on that old behaviour, and we amplify it. And we keep going into worst case scenarios. Oh, well, I don't want that to happen again. So we think of all the different ways that we can prevent it from happening again in case it happens again. It's a survival mechanism. So we're sinking our energy down and down and down into this vortex of lower energy. And it's all going down then into survival about an event that happened maybe 10, 15 years ago. That's not going to repeat, but you're perpetuating it. You're driving it into... And so they say, acknowledge the event, and it's not... the key is how long and how much emotion you keep giving to that event. And the real key is to take the emotion away. To say, yes, maybe I had a divorce, maybe I had a bad accident, through my own fault, and you acknowledge it and you let it go. You don't keep the drama going. You don't invest any more time in the drama and the emotion of it. And then you can recover, then you can heal. And like I said, some people don't want to. They really don't want to until something else happens that forces them. Or they have to take, they have to get old and sick and start again. So you don't want that. So again, you have to look, and I think this is very important, and a lot of people say, look at the drama in your life. Anywhere there's drama, real drama, emotional drama, you need to take that out. Take that out of the equation. You need to catch yourself. This is becoming conscious. This is transcending the ego. Why am I being so dramatic? Why am I allowing people to press my buttons? Why am I pressing other people's buttons? This is all creating drama, isn't it? This is all ego. And it's all lower energy feeding. It's taking our energy, and it's actually wasting our time.
Yeah.
And that's a crime. We always say it's a crime to waste time, especially now. So any drama, you go, you know what? Don't invest me in your drama. That's what I say to people. Once people get dramatic around me, I either walk away or I give them one chance, and I'm like, you know what? Now you're getting dramatic. Don't invest me in your drama, because I don't need drama. I need smart, intelligent solutions to where we're going and what we're doing, and then we can get the job done, and then we can go and have some fun. We can go climbing or whatever we want to do. I don't want to get invested in the drama, because it always pulls you down. And drama is in the media. There's so much drama in the media. They create drama because it makes, oh my God, righteous indignation, and then you feel helpless as well, and everybody's talking about it, but there's nothing you can do about it. And the media know that, it's this like elixir, they're like, oh, we can get you with, people get addicted to their drama. They get addicted to their stuff, so we need to step outside of that, let it all go, become conscious of who we are, and then elevate ourselves, elevate our emotions, elevate our consciousness, elevate our mental state, so there is no drama. Because there's no drama at the highest levels. It's pure joy, it's love, it's understanding, it's wisdom, it's being in spirit. It's much, much more beautiful. And you can have drama there, but you create it in your own ways. It's good drama, it's fun kind of drama, as opposed to like traumatic drama. So yeah, great question. Trauma.
And I know something you said earlier, which I think relates back to this too, is this idea of the observer and the observed, right? Like we have these thoughts that are coming, 70,000 a day or whatever, 90,000 a day, and the more we can separate ourselves from ourselves, or I've read a few different spiritual books now that talk about this idea of like actually looking at our thoughts as an outside
Yes.
person, right?
Yeah.
And in a way that separates ourselves from that drama
Of
as
course.
well.
Yeah. You become the third person. Yeah. The deeper you go into yoga, the more distance you put between your mental body, your emotional body, your drama body, So as you go deeper and deeper into Tai Chi, into Bhakti, into meditation especially, but just asana yoga, you start to become much more detached. And you get to a point where you become the observer looking at how you're thinking. And it's quite a breakthrough moment that you can go, oh, wow, David, look at you're thinking these thoughts. And they're not probably very healthy, and they're not going to lead you to a very cool place.
Right.
And it's you that's watching, it's you that's doing that observing, watching yourself think. So there's two parts to you. And then you realise, oh, this is the spirit soul part of me looking at the ego, mind, intellectual part of me. And then you can see it. You're actually becoming the yogi over here, observing you doing life, And then once you can do that, you're not unconscious to it anymore. You're like, I need to change that. I need to stop the drama. I need to get out of those trauma, addictive patterns. I need to clean up my mental act, and I need to come back to positive creative thinking. Positive creative thinking, leads to positive creative events. Negative thinking always leads to more negativity and just puts you on that endless spiral downwards. So yeah, become the observer, and that's purely the practice of yoga. You can't practice becoming the observer. You practice the yoga, and the observer effect just becomes, it just naturally settles onto you. You like, wow, I'm just looking at my other self over there, playing this role in life, And again, in yoga we call it lila, the play of life, the lila, we're doing the dance of life, and behind it your soul nature is just watching what's going on. But even, you've got to understand this in yoga as well, the experience of life, the positive creative, but sometimes the non-positive as well, is what allows you to grow. If you didn't do anything in life, you wouldn't grow. If you stayed in the same little village, doing the same job with the same people, you're going to do that 5 points in a lifetime, aren't you? So you actually have to be a little bit bold, a little bit courageous, a little bit adventurous. Go out there, push the physical boundaries, push the intellectual boundaries, push the creative boundaries, push the spiritual boundaries, but keep watching. Don't be controlling, but be in control. Gain a mastery. This again is the Zen path. The Zen, you become the Zen master, the yogi master, by taking control of your life. And ultimately, at the higher levels of yoga, you start to dictate the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings that you want to put out into the unified field of all intelligence, so that you can manifest things back into your life. You become an absolute master yogi of your mind and your mind's ability to create vision and intention and put it out there. And then you're awake enough and alert enough that when the opportunities, when the rebound comes and the universe delivers, you're like, well, thank you so much, that's just what I was expecting because I asked for that. And that's a real master yogi at work. But you've got to get through all the other stuff first. You can't be a master yogi when you're involved in the drama and the emotions at a lower level. So you've got to clean up that part of yourself. And I think at this point, especially for most people today, stuck in houses, stuck in villages, can't work, this is such an amazing opportunity to do that work. This is the time to clean up our act. This is the time to start getting on the yoga path and developing an hour or 2 hours every day. I do like 4 or 5 hours a day now. And it's wonderful, and I hope I'm transforming a little bit faster now because I've got time to do it. I'm not stuck in work mode and in business mode, and I've got time to celebrate consciousness mode. And that's only going to make me a more powerful human being eventually. So we've all got that opportunity right now. We should be taking the opportunity through online yoga and through these kind of understandings, these wisdom discussions, to work on ourselves. Get that basic work done and then start growing. And it only gets better. It only gets better. And of course the other side is, we can get lazier, we can get more sedimentary, we can close our energy patterns down, we can put weight on, and we can become more helpless. And which do you want? The yogi will always take the positive creative side. And that's the evolutionary side. That is the journey of life. I mean, the soul comes into the body in order to grow.
Mm.
The soul takes on a human form to walk the earth plane and experience life so that it can grow.
Mm.
You know? So you're actually here to grow, you're here to become, and we would say through the practice of yoga, but it's through the practice of experiencing life, isn't it? And even if you don't have the most amazing experiences sometimes in life, you take a perspective and say, well, I can learn from that. That didn't go so well, maybe that relationship or that job or this place that I went to live, but I won't do that again. I'm conscious enough to know that I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to grow from that, and then become a smarter person because of that, you know, and I'll make better choices in the future. And I've got the technology to make better choices because I'm becoming a yogi. I know what to do. I know how to do my yoga practices. I know how to check in so that I can have a clear mind, that I can have elevated emotions, I can have superior energy, I can have a vision, I can be inspired, you know? And there's no reason why anybody can feel like stuck down in the dark end of the tunnel anymore.
Yeah.
We've got all of that information out there, and we're putting Island Yoga and all the other great yoga centres around the world are putting that information out consistently now.
You know, I think a lot about.
So a great time to wake up.
Great time to wake up. And if you have any final questions, please send them our way. But you know, I think a lot about what you were saying about how important it is to travel and expand perspective.
Mm.
And even for me, I'm from San Francisco, which is like, you know, everything is about freedom and liberation. And but it wasn't until I started traveling that I realized that so much of what I think about as like a rule of life or things that I know to be true, suddenly you go somewhere else and you realize those rules don't apply here.
Yeah.
And I love, you know, one of my favorite analogies is you go to Italy and they say that if a bird poops on you, it's a good omen, right?
Yeah.
Building that perspective, for me, a lot of what it's done is it's made me realize that a lot of the ways that I feel like I've been suffering are just perspective.
It's only perspective.
And even the suffering itself, when you go somewhere else, they look at those things as joyous things, or good omens, or and even death in a lot of cultures.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating in that way how, you know, I was reading Osho's book on Tantra, and a lot of what he talks about is there are no rules.
Exactly.
And we have to let go of those rules.
There are no rules. Culture and society make rules up, and we need some rules in order to be functioning in the society. But the truth of it is, when you become a yogi, you transcend those rules. You transcend cultural rules, and then there's only a spiritual laws. And you can choose to ignore those, but you ignore those at your peril, you know? So next week, I think it's next week, we're going to talk about the 7 spiritual laws, Deepak Chopra.
So next week is healing and wholeness.
Healing
and then
and
we
wholeness
get into the 7
week,
spiritual
and then
laws.
we get into the spiritual laws. But you're absolutely right. I always feel travel is the great educator. You know, there's no better way of expanding than traveling and seeing different cultures and different ways, societies and different religions, you know, in different environments in the world. It really wakes you up, and the more you can travel when you're young, it's just such a great investment, you know. So that's living, breathing yoga to me straight away. Go travel, and travel as much as you can, and travel consciously, you know, and travel, you know, in a kind of bio-conscious way. You know, eco-conscious way, I should say. But through that, take perspective. Take perspective on who you were, how you are when you're traveling, and where you want to go as a human being, as a soul nature walking the earth plane. And then I think once you've got that expanded sense of self, you know, that you've got your ego over here, but you've got your masterful soul nature over there really running the show, and you're checking in, then life's magnificent. And you look forward to celebrating life with all peoples from around the world and all cultures, and taking part in them all. There's no rules. When I'm in India, I go to Hindu temples. If I'm here, I can go to the mosque, you know. If I'm in England or Europe, I'll go to a big cathedral, an ancient cathedral. It's got a lot of prayer power, and I'll do the meditations in there, you know. Here in Southeast Asia, I'll go to Buddhist temples, you know, or just be in nature on the beach, you know, or in the privacy of my own place doing my practices and stuff. So maybe the only real rule is karma. You know, you do something and it has to have a reaction to it, you know. It has to give you back what you put in. So again, maybe at a much higher level, you understand the only rule is just being and then doing. And being is just being in consciousness, being aware, not thinking, not being in any kind of cerebral state, just being present, being in this present moment awareness. That's no rule, it's a state of being. And then once that beingness tells you you should be going over here and doing this with those people, that becomes doing. And you do what you're instructed to do by your soul nature. You're inspired to do something, you do it, and it has to have a reaction, it has to have a return to it, and you watch what happens from that intercourse, from that reaction with somebody else, that joining together with other dynamics, and you see what comes of it, and you take stock of that, and you become being again, and you understand, I had an interaction, and it generated this set of circumstances, and it's all just consciousness, it's just floating around in your consciousness, and it starts to build a picture of like, now I had this kind of interaction with somebody over here, or this group of people, and that worked out quite well, and now it's given me the ability to do something else over here, or do something else over there, or do that same thing again. And that's conscious in motion. So ultimately you become a conscious yogi, And as we know, there's a physical side to it, and there's a mental and emotional side to it, but most of it, there's no rule. You make the rules up, but the only rule is karma. You put something out, and it has to come back. So you make sure that you put positive, creative, life-affirming, holistic practices out there, so that that's what you start to get back, and you start to generate a positive, powerful karma for yourself.
I mean, that's physics too, right?
Of course
Cause
it
and
is.
effect.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things in physics is this idea that just by being a volume of mass, just by taking up space, you're inherently impacting everything else, right? Just by existing, or even right now, just by being in stillness, we are impacting everything in the universe.
Yeah. I mean, even the breathing is just physics.
Yeah.
You bring energy up, and it's causing reactions in the body which create through quantum interactions in the brain and in the spine. It creates an energy pattern, and that energy pattern goes out, and that starts to affect things. It creates, they call it an induction field. You create an induction field around you, and that induction field is a radiance around you. It's an energy pattern around you that's very powerful and very positive and very intelligent.
Yeah.
So again, it's physics. We are, biological and chemical, electrical, biomagnetic. It's all of these things, and we harness all of those powers. And I feel personally, especially the practice of Tai Chi in the morning, that has a very powerful effect of building this exterior immune system around you, this powerful energy field around you, which at one level keeps you healthy, but at a different level gives you more intelligence, not intellect. All of this powerful high frequency energy has intelligence to it, and it is a part of who you are, and it starts to touch out into other realms of intelligence out there, and it's reading that intelligence, and it's giving you the information back. And conversely, if you're down in stress mode, if you're in survival mode, that also has a kind of intelligence to it, but it's a very low grade intelligence. It's a survival, and it's going out there, and all it's giving you back is more survival.
Right.
So we need to raise the game. We need to do more yoga.
I think this is a great way to close it out, is for everyone at home right now, everyone in quarantine, what are some tangible practices we can be doing, or specific exercises we can be doing that are specifically focused around expanding consciousness?
For me, these days, I would say, as much as the asana yoga, I would say pranayama. I really would. I would say do more breathing, and do really powerful conscious breathing, Kapalabhati breathing, the powerful, boom, 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 pumping breathing. And Kapalabhati, you look at that on Google and YouTube, and then you draw that energy up and up and up through the spine. You do Mula Bandha lock, you do Uddiyana Bandha lock, you squeeze the perineum, you squeeze the lower abdomen, you squeeze the upper abdomen, and you pull that energy up and up and up and up, all the way up to the spine, all the way up to the base of the head, and it opens into the limbic brain, where the pineal gland resides, and it opens the pineal gland, and that really becomes the expansion consciousness. That's the seat of Dharma. That's where soul nature comes in, and it's you activating your physical beingness through pranayama, sending the cerebral spinal fluid up into the brain and opening the sight.
Thank you so much. I mean, for YouTube anyway. So this series is living on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe. Also, in our newsletter, we're sending out a lot of great asana practices, as well as tips on pranayama, Kapalabhati. All of this is going to be in our newsletters. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you so
Namaste.
much. Namaste. All right.